Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Connor Group's Breakthrough Work podcast. I'm your host, Ravi Kumar, partner, national market leader at Connor Group. Connor Group is built for breakthroughs. We're a professional services firm focused on the most critical opportunities and challenges facing ambitious companies. Breakthrough Work lets leaders and companies who shattered the status quo tell their stories about getting to the other side. We talk to senior leaders from companies who you know well and reveal what it took to make them the household names they are today. We also feature companies emerging quickly, the ones breaking through as we speak. They talk about what it's like to be in the moments defining their future. My guest today is my good friend, Mike Bufano, CFO at League One Volleyball, pronounced love, not love B. Mike, can you please introduce yourself and love to our audience?
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. Happy to be here. I've been enjoying the podcast so far. So as Robbie said, I'm Mike Bufano. I actually have 2 roles at League One Volleyball. I'm both the CFO of the whole company, and I'm the president of our youth clubs business. So for those who don't know Love, we have 2 businesses. We are the biggest operator of youth volleyball clubs in America. We have 78 clubs as of today. When you think of youth volleyball, think of youth soccer, like travel soccer, that sort of thing, where athletes join a club. And then we also have an indoor women's professional volleyball league that completed its first season in April. And we're thrilled with the progress that we had in season 1.
Yeah, as a parent of four kids, I truly understand the other side of the business of youth sports. So I'm thankful for Love and what you guys are doing to further the game. And we'll kick it off. So Mike, you've held senior roles at some of the most recognizable brands, PepsiCo, Panera, Allbirds. What about Love was so compelling for you as the next landing spot in your career?
Yeah, really for me, it came down to like a few things. The first thing is I've always wanted to work in sports. I'm a lifelong sports fanatic. So the fact that I actually get paid to talk about at work what I talk about with my friends all the time is amazing. It's a dream job in that regard. The second thing is our founding team and the executive team that I joined is phenomenal. And I thankfully reached that point in my career where I can be picky and choosy about the people I work with. So I always want to work with great folks. And then the third thing, like I mentioned earlier, like having the dual role, we can talk a little bit more about kind of career path later on, but the chance to kind of operate both in the finance role and in an operating role is a pretty unique opportunity. And then completely selfishly, I love the impact that we have on the world, the positive things that youth sports does for people, especially young women. It's kind of proven again and again and again. So knowing I get to wake up every morning and think about that and have an impact on that is pretty amazing.
Yeah, those pinch me moments are, really, really spectacular at this stage in your career. And this is a perfect segue. I actually forgot about the president of the youth sports business. And when you and I have talked about your roles in the past, you describe yourself as a CFO plus. You're embodying that already at Love. Can you share a little bit more about what that means to you for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it goes back to a long career of being a bit undecided about what I wanted to be when I grew up. I kind of tell people that I'm a good business person who happens to be really good at math and Excel. So I kind of got in the sorting hat in Harry Potter. I got sorted into the finance function eventually. But typically, honestly, was working in more of like a strategic business partner, with a lot of the companies I worked in, helping brands, helping sales teams, helping, the whole team at Panera think through what we should do with the business. And I think that naturally then leads to wanting to do more than the spreadsheets and more than the numbers. And for me in particular, getting the opportunity to work at a business like Panera, where we own half the restaurants, it's a very hands-on operational business. That's when I kind of learned there's an operator deep inside, that numbers geek as well. And I've tried to follow that passion and curiosity into other roles.
No, absolutely. I think one of your other quotes that I've always loved and embodied myself is that you said that you're more passionate than you've been ambitious. Is that fair?
It is. I have to have credit. Usai Majeri, the president or the former president of the Toronto Raptors, used that. I stole it. I think I actually heard it on a podcast. So whoever steals it from this podcast, give Usai credit, not me. It's that idea of like, I've actually like modified it a little bit because I think, especially if you're, going to work incredibly hard at something, you almost need to find this balance of something you're passionate about, something you're really curious about, that you actually want to wake up every morning and work on and solve problems, and then something you're really talented at. right? That you have that ability to do the job the company has put you in. I think if you can match those three things, odds are most people are going to be pretty successful in what they do.
Yeah, don't worry. We're not far enough in this podcast where we're getting fact checked and, people are calling us out for stealing quotes. But I always, I tell folks, find something you're extremely passionate about and then find someone to pay you to do it. That's the dream right there, right?
Absolutely. Because if you're passionate about it, you're going to grind, right? Like you guys work with a lot of early stage companies, a lot of hyper scaling and hyper growth companies. Like you do have to get up every morning and want to do it. It's hard, right? Like sometimes the work isn't complex. It's just hard and you have to stay at it. And you're much more likely to do that if it's something you're passionate about and something you're curious about figuring out.
Oh, I mean, plus one and amen to all of that. So, when you were at Panera, I like to say it, or I think you said it yourself, was you got to the other side and you had a career breakthrough when, you climbed the ranks of FP&A. You were even on the operations side and were a disruptor in your own right and rolling out online ordering at Panera, which is now the standard for fast casual dining. And then you were interim CFO, but while you were interim CFO, your CEO and founders were actually interviewing candidates for that role. Talk a little bit about what that experience is like, and then we'll also talk a little bit about just the personal side of it as well.
Yeah, it's the classic problem that happens, right? You've worked your way up through a piece of the business or a piece of the function, and then how do you break through and how do you show the rest of the executive team that you're the person that they can rely on and look at you in a different context? So in my case, the CFO before me decided to leave relatively suddenly. I was actually right before he left. I was about to move to a different role in the organization. I was going to move to the supply chain team because there wasn't a clear path for me in the finance function. And it was a pretty weird, 6 months of an on-the-job tryout. Like, I'm not going to lie, Robbie. There were days where I've come home and I'm like, I'm killing it. This went great. And there's other days where I'm like, I am not killing it. That did not go great. And a gentleman named Bill Morton, who'd been involved with Panera for a long time at that point, was on our board of directors. Bill pulled me aside at one point and he gave me some really honest feedback. And I think sometimes when you're in that breakthrough moment, you need to hear that honest feedback. And of all the advice Bill gave me was, he told me that I needed to stop being the head of planning and I had to really start being the CFO. And he's like, you have to look at it differently. And he gave me the silliest but best advice. He told me to change seats in the conference room when we were going through planning meetings. And he's like, you will literally look at it differently if you sit in a different seat. And it was some of the best advice anybody ever gave me. And I would not be who I am in my career if not for a mentor like Bill. He's had this fundamental impact on me. He and then Ron, the founder of Panera, both. But that advice helped me kind of get through those times when I was doubting myself and asking myself, could I be the CFO the company needed?
Yeah, no, I've always said, for my coachees that I mentor through the various organizations that I've worked, that, a promotion is really, more of a coronation for doing all of the things that you're already doing. I never thought of actually physically and literally changing your seat to change the perspective that you have. But, it's kind of like, changing from, the executive hat to the dad hat when you come home. Sometimes folks will say, take a walk around your house to just, decompress and change your mindset. So that's great advice.
Yeah. And even literally part of it is the perception of other people, right? I went from sitting 2 seats down from Ron to literally sitting at his left hand. I took it very literally. I'm like, I want to be his left hand. I will sit on his left hand. But it does help even how other people inside the company perceive you when you're going through something like that.
No, absolutely. And I know you and I have had personal conversations in addition to business conversations. And that period of time when you were making that transition to the full-time CFO role, I know was a very critical time in your personal life as well. As you and I, as men, we both realize that we probably don't always talk enough about mental health. I know I've probably been hard-headed about a lot of those types of things, but talk about how the personal developments in your life impacted the professional period of your life at that time.
Yeah, happy to. So at the time this was all happening, I had just turned 40. So I don't know if I was having a midlife crisis, but maybe the start of one. Thankfully, I didn't buy a Porsche. I started running marathons. So we can unpack that on another podcast, Ravi. And I was going through a divorce. I went through a separation and a divorce while all this was happening. And I share that with people, one, because if you look at all this on paper, so you were going through a little mini midlife crisis, you were going through a divorce, and you were on a day-to-day basis on an emotional roller coaster trying to figure out where you're going to get what felt like your dream job. That's pretty hard, right? To kind of navigate all that at the same time. But through the divorce and through some of the work we were trying to do on our marriage at the time, what I did is it got me into therapy and it got me into personal therapy then. And I started to finally unpack a bunch of stuff for myself. And it doesn't just influence my personal life. I think it had a fundamental impact on how I like showed up as a leader and showed up as a person for my team. And some of it was like self-awareness when I was getting triggered by stuff personally. Some of it was understanding a little bit more empathy for people and how what they were kind of going through in the moment. And some of that honestly was like even in your own relationships that you have with the people who work with you, your boss, like all of those relationship dynamics from your family of origin, that all shows up whether you're thinking about it or not, right? Like in the moment. So being able to understand that stuff a lot better, I think ultimately helped me be really successful in the role at Panera. And I will give like Ron credit, like, the founder of Panera, because while all this was going on, he and I we were on a trip together, an investor trip, and he started to talk to me about some of his own experiences in his life. He went through a very similar time in his life as I was going
Mm.
through then. And he always talked very openly with people. And he's talked about this in his book about the importance of having emotional balance, like as a leader and unpacking some of that stuff. And I don't know if I was working for somebody else at the time, if I could have had that same experience. And I think that's a gift that I then try to pay forward to people who work with me now.
Yeah, no, I think in a lot of ways you embody the modern day leader and executive. And not only, I mean, maybe 15, 20 years ago, it was all about IQ. And I think the modern day executive, it's all about that balance between IQ and EQ. And what better way to understand other people's emotions than to start with, yourself. And so it's something that I've really tried to focus on as well. And, I really appreciate you sharing those personal stories. And I didn't know you had that that bonding moment with Ron as well over that.
Yeah, it was amazing. And you're right about that balance of IQ and EQ. And I think some of it is generational. I honestly think some of it is if you're in a consumer business or a service oriented business, like the ones I've worked on, like how can you be good like at serving your customers and serving your clients if you don't understand yourself and how you're showing up for them? And if you don't
Yeah.
understand them, right? And look at the world through their eyes. And you guys do this, right? Like your job is to serve customers like every single day and serve clients every single day. You have to have that EQ to be good at it.
Yeah, and at Connor Group, what we try to do is, not only hiring the smartest people in the room at times, but also those that have sat in our clients' seats, right? And so it's that ability to connect and starting a sentence. Well, when I was in your role at X, Y, and Z company, here's
Yeah.
how we did it, and just that credibility that's transferred to in those conversations is so critical to building that relationship. So no, thanks for sharing that. And I think that's another angle of your relationship with Ron is, switching back to the work side.
Hmm.
What is it like to work with a hands-on founder who is so passionate and, has a lot of both their time and a huge chunk of their personal wealth tied up in a company that they're actively managing?
Yeah. So I've now worked with founders on a full time basis 3 times. So at Panera, at Allbirds, and now at League One. And I've done it like on an intern basis a couple of times as well. And I'll tell you, every founder is very different. I think in retrospect, I probably got spoiled a little bit that I got Ron a little bit later on in his career. Like I don't know if 40-year-old Mike and 40-year-old Ron would have quite worked. but slightly older Ron
Timing
and
is
like
everything.
figuring
Yeah.
his crap out, Mike probably worked a little bit better, I would say. But I think when if you're especially like in the CFO seat or COO seat and you're working with the founder, I think one of the things you have to understand is what are the founders like superpowers? What are
Yeah.
they particularly really, really, really great at? And then how do you in your role complement them? And I always tell people now, like I figured out some point around that time in a basketball analogy, like I'm not Michael Jordan. I'm Scottie Pippen. right? Scottie Pippen's a top 50 all-time player, a great player, can do a lot of stuff on the court, but I'm probably not Michael Jordan. I'm okay with that, right? And that's probably
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
what's led me to work with founders a lot in my career. So figuring out what your Pippen is to their Jordan, I think is a huge part of it. And the biggest advice I give people in working with founders is like, there are times I know a founder will just drive you crazy when you're like an operating executive. And just remember, they're probably doing it because they think they're helping, right? Whatever it is they're doing, whatever they choose to dig into, whatever the thing is that you think you have on lockdown, like as the CFO, and the founder starts getting in there and asking about it, they're asking because they think they're helping, or they think the company can make a better decision, or we can unpack a problem because of their unique experience. And that's where you have to put your ego aside a little bit and trust that they're doing this to help. They're not doing it just to be controlling, though some founders can be a little bit controlling sometimes too. So you have to take the good with the bad in that regard.
Yeah, but some days, when you truly crush it in any given day, you come home feeling like Michael Jordan, and other days you come home feeling like Luke Longley. I hope I don't get a bunch of hate mail now from Luke Longley fans, but yeah,
We're going to tank in Australia with that. They're going to be so mad at us, right?
Well, don't worry. We'll actually switch gears to talk about the South Pacific a little bit right now. So,
all right,
you took an upstart shoe brand, Allbirds, public. Having lived in New Zealand for 3 years, studied in Australia. That's kind of why I went in that direction.
Nice.
Go Kiwis. I know a thing or two about merino wool. So what's it like to take a trendy shoe brand through an IPO? Maybe walk us through your lessons learned, the good, the bad, and possibly the ugly.
Yeah. So Allbirds went public in November 2021, and we'll get back to that date and that fact a little bit as we got to go through the story. I would tell you, like, first off, like, I walked in the company a little bit less than a year before we went public. So huge credit to the team that was there before me, both the founders, the rest of the executive team, and a lot of the foundation that was in place from the finance team. Because I didn't have to walk in and completely, I didn't have to like gut the house and like rebuild it on the finance side. I had to remodel a little bit, and some of it was paint, and some of it was swapping out furniture, and some of it was, okay, we got to take down this wall. But it wasn't like a huge kind of gut project. I think the most important thing if you're a CFO going through an IPO is to try to keep like a level head about things and try to stay really focused on, in any given week, any given month, what are the most important parts of the process to get right. And you have to have this balance with your team of being a cheerleader, which is kind of generally my personality, to be upbeat and kind of like lead with positivity, but also have built the trust with them that you can have a hard conversation, or they can come to you when they found something somewhere in the process that they're like, oh no, like this is potentially an issue. How do we handle it? So that's kind of the biggest advice I'd give. The other thing is, like, you have to be really thoughtful about who you pick as your advisors and your partners. We were really, really fortunate that, we were a high profile IPO. We had built great relationships with a lot of the banks. So there were several times during the process when I needed to make that late night phone call and kind of figure out whose opinion do I really want on a certain issue. And knowing that that's somebody that you can really trust, and that, yes, you're always their client, you're always their product, but you built a good enough relationship with them that you can fully trust like what they're going to tell you. So those are probably my two big like lessons learned in the process.
Yeah, and in my conversation with Janine on the last episode, that was one thing that she really focused on was making sure that you had those advisors that, whether you got the answer you wanted to hear or the answer you didn't want to hear, knowing that you're going to get that authentic, response from your trusted advisors is so critical. And, from a Connor Group perspective, we always have these conversations with our clients around, especially in an IPO, it's that balance of capabilities and capacity, right? Because you're running in 50 directions. You've got analyst meetings. You've got the S1 document you're preparing. You're still keeping the lights on the day job. You've got transactions, and the business is still operating despite this massive transaction. How did you guys select the advisors, and how was that decision-making process between what you guys were going to do internally and where you would leverage an outside party like a Connor Group?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because every company is in a slightly different position. So in our case, so I had a lot of transaction experience. I had been a public company CFO. I hadn't done an IPO before. I do think, though, when you're going through a process like that, you have to really feel, as especially the finance team, real ownership over the S1, over how the financials are prepared, how you're going to do your external P&L, because you're going to live with it. You're going to live with it forever in your life as a public company. And you also understand it better. Like, one of our founders, Joey, he spent a lot of time in the S1 rewriting sections because he really felt truly like he had lived the whole journey. He had lived the whole story. He understood it.
Oh, yeah.
And it needed to be in, as much as an SEC document could be in one person's words, he wanted those things to be in his words. And I think that was actually really important because when we went out on the roadshow, people heard the story from him, from Tim, from me, and they understood who the company was, what we stood for, how we had built the business up to that point. And I think that authenticity and credibility came out because the transaction was amazing. The IPO itself was amazing. The company was valued in a fantastic spot. It raised all the cash the company needed for years to come. Life as a public company got a little bit more complicated because we have to talk about that. A little bit of our own doing, a little bit of the market doing, but the transaction itself went incredibly well because we knew very well who we were as a business and we were able to tell that story. So to your question, you have to have control over the things that you feel like are going to have the biggest impact on the process or have to come out in the most authentic way.
Yeah. And, coming off the highs of an IPO, we oftentimes talk about it as it's kind of the wedding, but then being a public company is more the focus on the marriage, right? As we're loaded with analogies. Now, how you talked about kind of that roller coaster coming out of the IPO and then navigating the chaos and the rough waters of the market as well as the business. Do you want to maybe expand on that a little bit on some of the ups and downs?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So when Allbirds went public, we were about 300 million in revenue and we were unprofitable on an EBITDA basis. Mm-hmm. So I now tell people, I think I have the distinction of being the last CFO to take an unprofitable consumer business public, which is a dubious distinction, but a distinction nonetheless. But
trendsetter again.
Right. But at the time, the market didn't care, right? Like it didn't matter. As long as they saw the growth potential, as long as they saw the path that the company was on, it didn't matter. And then honestly, within about 6 months, it did matter, right? Like Silicon Valley Bank melted down. People realized inflation was here to stay. Russia invaded Ukraine and a good chunk of Allbirds business was international. And all of a sudden, all of the companies like Allbirds were very quickly out of favor in the eyes of investors. And I'll be honest, Ravi, I struggled with it, right? I felt like I was letting down the company. I felt like I was letting down Joey and Tim and the board, that we couldn't go out there and sell the story or sell the company any differently, when the reality was we were probably incorrectly and falsely, valued high at some point by the market. We were barely valued for where the market was, but the market, valued us very high. Then I think we were undervalued for a long time, to be honest, right? I don't think people saw the potential in the business. Then I think going on a little further in the story, I think part of what happened to Allbirds, and the company's talked about this a lot publicly now, is there were some product choices and some operating decisions that we all collectively made, and I was certainly part of those decisions, that in retrospect we probably weren't ready for or weren't the right decisions. And I think I look back on it and I compare that Panera experience and that Allbirds experience. And at Panera, we always knew who our core customer was. And we were fanatically focused on serving that core customer no matter what. Yeah. And when we had a trade-off to make, it came down to that core customer. I think all of us at Allbirds sometimes were a little torn on who we really thought our core customer was and what they wanted from us. And I think we kind of lost focus on them. And in a category like footwear or fashion, you can lose that magic and that specialness really quickly in a customer's eyes if they feel like they're not being seen by you anymore. And I think we kind of missed on that a little bit, and it hurt us in the company's performance.
Yeah. So your audience wasn't the finance bro wearing Allbirds with no socks?
That probably was the audience, Robbie. And then I think we wanted to go to a different audience, or those people found On Running, and then they found Stan Smiths. Now they found Sambas. Or they found Jordans in the middle of that, right? Back to Michael Jordan. They kind of moved on to the next thing, for sure. But the Salesforce ones, as people kind of called Allbirds for a while there, was certainly very true and very fair, without a doubt. But I still think it's a cool it's worth. I still own a bunch of pairs of Allbirds. I think it's a great company. I think it's an amazing product. I think the good the company tries to do in the world really matters to the customers. who love it. And I know the company will be fine. There's a great leadership team there now. They will be fine over time. And the product is such a great product. I can't believe it won't, the business won't recover.
Yeah, I have a few pairs still, and at one of our firm-wide offsites, we gave everyone a pair of Allbirds.
Nice.
So we did our best to help with that path to profitability, but
I appreciate it, Robbie.
It was out of your control.
You got our back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm excited about the next part of our conversation, just the mission with love. It goes hand in hand with the advancement of women's sports. When we were doing our prep call, we had an amazing discussion about just the evolution of women's sports stemming from the enactment of Title IX in the early 70s, which has really contributed to about a 600% increase in female college athletic participation over that time span. And, is really driving the renaissance that we're seeing today across women's youth, amateur, Olympic, and professional sports. I would be privileged to hear you talk about that topic again, and just I'm sure our audience would truly enjoy it as well.
Well, now you really built it up, Robbie. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. People ask me when I took this role, right? A lot of people in my life are like volleyball, like women's sports, like kind of like, are you sure? It was like a very honest question that people asked me. And when I stepped back and looked at it, I tried to ask myself why? Because I joined the company in December of 2023. So after I left Allbirds, I joined Love. And at the time, women's sports was really just truly exploding. And I liked, again, being intellectually curious, I asked myself, why is this happening? Why are we at the point we're at? And in the US, at least, I kind of traced it back to what you said, to Title IX, right? So Title IX came in 1972. For those who don't know, it was part of a much bigger movement, a much bigger law. But what it effectively did is made sure that female athletics were funded properly at colleges and universities. So the NCAA made a real commitment to having women's sports programs. So in 1972, there were 30,000 women playing college sports. They accounted for about 15% of athletes. So you fast forward about one generation to the late 90s, that number then had grown to 74,000 women were playing college sports. So it was up 2.5 times from where it was, in 1972. And if you think about that time in the mid 90s and the late 90s, that's when you first started to see this boom, this renaissance in women's team sports in the US. And we'll kind of get to that in a minute, but that was the impact of Title IX. It took a generation really of women to play sports in college, raise their daughters, those daughters then to play sports in college for the US to become a powerhouse the way we did. So now you fast forward another generation, you go to kind of around 2020 or present day. Now you have, and I wrote down the number to make sure I had it right, 219,000 women played college sports last year in the US. That's over 7 times from the time the Title IX came to be. And 44% of the college athletes now are women. So in my mind, what this created is it's normal for women to be playing sports, right? In 1972, it wasn't normal. And now half the people who play college athletics are women, right? So that alone, I think, has fundamentally changed the way people think about the role of women in sports. Then to that point about the mid 90s and the late 90s, there's really a watershed moment that I think in women's sports that everyone thinks about. And it's the 1999 Women's World Cup. If you were alive, the Rose Bowl, Mia Hamm, Brandi Chastain. Brandi hits the penalty kick. She whips off her jersey, which was both this amazing athletic accomplishment and this pop culture moment that everyone to this day, if you live through it, you think about and you have the image and the photo in your mind, just like you would a Michael Jordan dunk or, Muhammad Ali over Sonny Liston, right? It's an iconic moment in sports. And from then on, women's soccer in the US just continued to explode, right? We've now won 3 World Cups, including that World Cup. So that happened on the soccer side. On basketball, starting in 1996, we've won every Olympic gold medal, 8 straight gold medals on the women's side. So while Caitlin Clark has fundamentally changed women's basketball, the reality is there's been a generation of dominance and great athletes that preceded Caitlin Clark, so that the road was paved for her, right? By the time a star of that kind of unique personality showed up, the world was ready for it. And then when I was thinking about all this, Robbie, then I looked at volleyball, and we're in the middle of a golden generation of volleyball players now, right? For the first time, the U.S. women have, medaled in 3 straight Olympics. We won our first gold medal in Tokyo in 2020. We won silver in Paris in 2024, and it's this first true golden generation of women's volleyball is happening right now. And you can trace all of this back to this fundamental idea that before Title IX, the most famous and decorated female athletes in America were individual sport athletes, tennis players, maybe track athletes, probably gymnasts and ice skaters, right? And now they're all team athletes. All of the most famous, female athletes in America are team sport athletes. So that's why it's now grown to a $2+ billion industry and record high valuations for, women's sports franchises. That's built for 50+ years from the legacy of Title IX.
Oh, yeah. Well, Mike, you accomplished your goal. I built it up and you absolutely hit it out of the park. So this was even more enlightening than our previous conversation. So thank you on that.
I actually looked up some facts this time to make sure I was right.
It sounded good in both
versions. I had it roughly
versions,
in my head last time, but I'm like, I want to make sure these numbers that I remember are real numbers. You told me no on facts checks, but you like to have
exactly. Like I said, no fact checks. We're good.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And now you've got, prolific sports investors like David Blitzer, Amy Griffin, the San Antonio Spurs coming in on, your Austin, Love professional team. I mean, what does that do for the validation of what Love is building in the world of professional volleyball?
Yeah, look, to have some of the best and most well-known sports investors in the world come in and make a bet on women's volleyball, it's game changing for us, right? It just changes the perception fundamentally, of the league and of the economic opportunity. Again, these are people who do not own sports teams to lose money, right? At a bare minimum, they operate sports teams to break even, and they know their franchise values are going to go up. And again, if you look at the world of women's sports right now, soccer teams, WNBA teams, those are going now for hundreds of millions of dollars in their valuations, if not more. So the fact that you could get in on something like volleyball, which has all the indications of being the next major league, and not just the next women's major league, the next major league. It is in our capability to do it. All of the indicators in the college game are there that it makes sense. So the fact that investors who do this across multiple sports look at us and say, yes, this is an asset that I want to add to my portfolio, I think it's fundamentally game changing. It's a massive vote of confidence in what we're trying to build on the pro side of the business.
No, it's amazing. And, you guys put out some big news recently. And when I kicked off this podcast, at no point did I think that I would actually be reciting a quote from Kim Kardashian on one of my podcasts, but I'm going to do it just to set the stage for the new partnership that you guys announced with Skims to be the official provider of loungewear, intimates, and sleepwear for Love. Here's a quote from Kim Kardashian, co-founder and chief creative officer at Skims. She said, "We're excited to partner with League One Volleyball and to support the incredible community they're building from youth sports all the way to the professional stage. Together, we look forward to inspiring confidence and empowering athletes at every level through innovative products, community activations, and storytelling that celebrates the athletes on and off the court." I mean, what does this partnership do for Love, for youth volleyball, and professional volleyball and women's sports in general?
You did an excellent Kim Kardashian impression, by the way, Robbie. That was great. I enjoyed it. The fact that a brand like Skims would want to partner with Love, and not just partner, but put the PR blitz they did with us this week behind it, I think it does speak volumes, both in kind of, again, the investment all brands, especially brands that are focused on younger consumers, are making in the world of women's sports. I think that alone is a great indicator. I think, to be honest, in terms of the profile of the league, that's still a bunch of people probably never heard of. If I stopped somebody in the street and said, "Did you know there's a women's professional volleyball league in the US?" they would go, "I had no idea," right? So if Kim and all her followers help get that message out, that's very powerful for us in kind of raising awareness and bringing more people to the game. Because I am very convinced from going through it in season 1 that if people come to the matches, if people watch the matches on TV, they're going to be blown away by the athletes in our league. But there's something really important in what they talked about in that announcement that's super important to us, because our model is unique within the world of sports, that we have both the professional league and the youth side of the business. And again, back to that point in time when I was debating, like, oh, would I want to join, like this company? I went and did a whole bunch of research on, because the Caitlin Gow, one of our co-founders and CEO,
Yeah.
she's like, oh, it's the biggest like team sport for girls in high school. And in my head, I'm like, that's not right. There's no, she's just like pitch back, right? Caitlin is not a liar. She was accurate. I researched this, but 480,000 young women play volleyball in high school now in the US. So it's the number one team sport. And it's actually going to pass track probably this season as the number one overall participation sport for young women. So again, you think about that generational effect, like we talked about in Title IX. All of the girls who watched Brandy Chastain then went on and played, and then they played through youth, they played through club, they played through college. They're now the biggest fans of the NWSL. Like that is all happening now with volleyball, and it's happening kind of even faster. So that connection that we have to the youth side of it, and all of these young women, 18 and under who are playing volleyball now, and a lot of them in our clubs, like to me, that's kind of like, I think why a brand like Skims, not just these amazing professional athletes being tied to the brand, it's also the fact that their brand is now associated with something that's really important in the life of a 15-year-old, which is really hard to do and really hard to find.
Oh no, absolutely. And I, lived close by to a couple of friends whose daughters were both in travel volleyball teams. And frankly, it was hard to track them down because they're going from one tournament to another tournament. So I definitely appreciate that stat about how many, youth women are playing volleyball. Definitely the commitment on both parents, coaches, and the community. And, I think staying on that topic for a little bit, I mean, Love is doing so much to further the game of youth volleyball. Do you want to touch on a little bit about what you're doing in terms of accessibility, coaching, outreach, and just support for these these young women?
Yeah, absolutely. So people, I think, can naturally be a little cynical of like the professionalization or the business side of youth sports. And I understand it. Like I do, right? I always say I'm a youth sports uncle, not a youth sports dad, but I understand the experience. I totally get it, right? I would say though, when you reach the size and scale that Love has started to reach on the youth side, again, we have 78 clubs as of today. We have over 22,000 athletes who played on our club teams like last year. Like that's an amazing number. We have about 4,000 coaches who coach in those clubs. When you start to reach that size and scale, there's a bunch of things you can do to help grow the game and hopefully have people have an experience that's more than just the competition, like on the court. So there's really three things that we do that we're really proud of. So the first is between our clubs themselves and our Love Foundation. Last season, we gave out almost $1 million in financial aid and helped over 500 young women have access to playing like elite volleyball, right? And playing club volleyball. So being able to help people kind of deal with some of that perception of, oh, it's too expensive, it's too much, right? That has a huge impact. As a kid who grew up with nothing, who went to college on grants and scholarship money and student loans.
Amen, brother.
Someone who gives you a little leg up, right? It matters, Rob, right? That little leg up in life can set your life off in a total different trajectory. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing is on the athletes, we've started over these last couple of seasons what we call our whole athlete training program. So we have a season-long program, kind of a different theme every month for our junior athletes. And they watch a video. They then have a journal they can write in. There's a different theme. So some months it's resilience. What does it mean to be a good teammate? How do you deal with body image issues? How do you manage a relationship with social media, right? All of those things. And we give them prompts to also kind of write about in these journals that we provide them. And what was cool tied to pro is last season, we recorded interviews with our pro volleyball players talking about their experiences with these same topics, right? So to hear somebody who now is literally pay volleyball and model talk about her suffering with like body image issues when she was 16-year old, like that's game changing, right? So that's the thing we say, we don't want to just make them great volleyball players. We want to make them great humans. And then the last thing is, I haven't been around this business for too long, but in a couple of years, I have learned and watched it in my own life. The single biggest thing that impacts like an athlete and family experience is the quality of the coach, but both the actual training the coach provides and then how the coach interacts with people. So, to their credit, the clubs that join the Love community, become part of Love, they have been around for a while. They know how to coach their coaches. They know how to invest in their coaches. And we can do that much more with the national scale, right? So a woman named Jenny McDowell runs a coach to coach program for us. And it is the thing that we provide for our clubs that we always get the highest possible feedback on, because it's just meant to supplement what the coaches are already doing. And again, we know if a coach has a little bit of extra technical training, or they have a little bit more back to that emotional awareness, right? A lot of our coaches are in their 20s, right? How to interact with the parent when a parent's upset, how to interact with an athlete when the athlete's upset. The test is always when the kid gets in the car after practice, is the kid sad or happy, right? Like as a parent, that's all you're going to care about, right? You want your kids to be happy.
Yeah.
That's what you care about. So knowing that we can invest in our coaches to make sure that they can be prepared, to make sure our athletes both get a great training experience and a really safe emotional experience, that's huge for us, right? And those are the kind of things we can do with scale that you can tell I'm super passionate about, because I don't think any coach ever wants to be an athlete's last coach, right? Because they had a bad experience. No coach wants that, right? So we want to prepare our coaches to never be in that position.
Yeah, well, no, the passion is definitely exuding from you, and I feel it. And you've had a number of dream jobs, I think, in your career, and you found your latest dream job. So I'm super happy for you. While we're talking about women's sports and the progress since Title IX, just kind of your heat check on where we stand in the future of women's sports. Are we in the early innings? Are we at halftime? Are we in the home stretch? I mean, where do you think we stand in just the advancement of women's sports in general?
I still think we're honestly probably in the early innings. I think if you look at the resources that are put into it, I mean, let's take the WNBA like TV contract stuff over the last few years is like a small example, right? The fact that those games draw similar ratings to what most NBA games draw, and the economics that are just fundamentally different, and that will kick in a little bit differently next year. I think that just shows it's still very early days. Again, I even look at our world of volleyball. So, in the women's college volleyball especially has really exploded over the last several years. So now there's more women playing college volleyball than any other sport besides soccer. So it's right up there. It's basketball, women's soccer, women's volleyball. It's kind of the three revenue sports, softball to a certain extent, kind of the four revenue sports in the college side on the women's piece. And volleyball, very regularly draws 1 million to 1.5 million to 2 million viewers on Sunday afternoons in the fall against the NFL. The Final Four drew 2 million viewers against the Cowboys Bills game, which is a Cowboys fan I did not enjoy. It was not a good day for the Cowboys.
It's been a rough 20 plus years for you. Yeah.
it was a very dacky game for the Cowboys, that game, let's just say. But the Final Four drew those kind of numbers, those kind of viewership numbers. And I think that's why I think we're still in the early innings, Ravi, because now with the House settlement on the NCAA side, which for those who don't follow these things obsessively as you or I might, that means that colleges are now allowed to revenue share and pay athletes directly. It does sort of fundamentally change the economics of college sports. So the fact that these 4 women's sports are revenue sports, it means those athletes are going to get their fair share of the revenue that is there. And that is then only to continue to advance and build them when they're ready to go professional in any of those sports. They're going to be known and they're going to be personalities already. And it's the same dynamic that's happened in men's sports for generations that's now going to follow in women's sports.
No, absolutely. I mean, as a former collegiate athlete, I mean, I played water polo and I swam, so no one was really paying me to wear their Speedo. But I did moderate. I know.
We should talk to your friend Kim Kardashian. If Skims launches a line,
hey, we're covering a lot of ground here, Mike. But I did moderate a really fun panel at the end of a life sciences liquidity summit with a former Super Bowl champion, a good friend of mine, Benny Fowler, and then a pioneer in Zach Beebe, who started a company called NILmanagement.com. And it was such an interesting discussion talking about their two perspectives of, is NIL good? And for our audience that isn't familiar with NIL, the name, image, and likeness, and to your point, the ability to compensate amateur and collegiate athletes for their name, image, and likeness. Is it good for the game of sports and for college athletes and for just the universities in general? And so there was at times a polarizing view because, NIL was there before Benny. And, for the other athletes where maybe this was their only opportunity to capitalize on their, name, image, and likeness, and there wasn't a pro career for them down the road. I tend to sympathize with both viewpoints, but I'd love to get your perspective on what you think NIL is doing for collegiate sports.
I think it's a net positive for the athletes, and I think we have to stay focused on the athlete, right? Again, take it back to love. We're focused on the experience of our youth athletes and what their day-to-day is like in the club and what their experience is. We want our professional athletes to have a great experience and have comfortable travel, great training facilities, access to the best medical care, all of those things. We invested in benefits. We were in the first leagues to give them year-round benefits, for example, right? For our pro athletes. I think at the end of the day, the athletes are the product in any sport, and the athletes should be fairly compensated for what they do. I also think the world of, I will say something mildly controversial. The NCAA has not been the world's best run organization. I know I'm breaking news to you, Robbie, but they have not been the world's best run organization over the last 30 years. And there's a lot that was happening that the NCAA couldn't really enforce or couldn't really police. So part of me is like, get all this ugliness out into the light, pay the athletes fairly, and then see how it shakes out. And industries change, things change. Like we talk a lot internally to love, especially on the pro side, that like the world has changed a little bit to attention economy, right? You hear this on podcasts now. They talked about this on the Daily a few weeks ago, right? And part of this is the athletes are the one who draw the attention. So if it's an attention economy and they're the source of the attention, they should get compensated for it. Now, I think the totality of a transfer portal every year in college, which lets athletes kind of change season to season, plus the fact that they can get paid, plus the fact that they get paid for NIL, like all of that is probably making the end product a little bit like uneven right now when you watch this in a lot of the sports. But I think that's going to right itself a little bit over time. So I don't know, I come down to the camp of athletes are the labor should get paid, especially in college when they weren't getting paid for any of this stuff. I think it's fair.
Yeah. No, 100%. And, like you disrupted fast casual with online ordering. I think that's the analogy that I have, what NIL is doing for college sports. But Mike, I can't believe that we've already gone through almost an hour in our time here today. On my first few episodes, I've had one final question, which I guess is slowly becoming my hook. And that is, success has its trade-offs and requires sacrifices. So if you could do it all over again, would you? And if not, what would you do differently?
I am generally a don't do it over again person. I'm going to give a caveat to this in 1 second. In part because I think you learn the most from like your mistakes, and you learn the most from the things that didn't go the way you expected. Very early in my career at Pepsi, I was the planner on a product called Pepsi Blue that no one remembers existed. It was
I do.
It was a very light blue soda that looked like Windex. I forecasted that we would sell 100 million cases, which is the unit of measure in soda. We sold about 17 million, which was a lot, relatively speaking, but really bad. I was off by about 80%. And one of the things I learned from that, one, I was afraid I was going to get fired. Thankfully, I didn't get fired. But two, what I learned from that experience, two things I learned from the experience is one, when you are the analytical person, as an example, you have to kind of divorce yourself a little bit from the emotion and the group think. And you have to try to look at it rationally. And you have to at least force yourself to ask the question, what's the worst that can happen? No one likes to ask that question, but it was literally my job to ask that and give scenarios. And I was 27 and too dumb to do it, right? But I learned from that experience. The other thing is have a plan B, because not only was the soda blue, the coloring we were using in it, we couldn't use in anything else. So we had to write off a whole bunch of coloring and a whole bunch of stuff where if we just used the same blue as Gatorade, we might have been able to save some of that. So have a plan B. So I generally would say I'm you learn from your mistakes person. But going back to the beginning of our conversation, Robbie, one of the things I would say that I look back at myself now in my career, and especially when I started to manage people and lead teams, I think I was still a little bit of an angry young man sometimes, and kind of wasn't quite in connection with myself and my own emotions. And I didn't always deal with people with the amount of empathy that I try to deal with people with now. So if I could go back and give myself one relatively useless piece of advice in a time machine, but probably helpful in the grand scheme of things, it would try to be a little bit less angry at the world and try to be a little bit more empathetic to people, because everybody's kind of going through something. And it took me, during that time at Panera to really learn that about myself. And I think it's changed me in the last, 10 plus years as a leader and a human.
No, I mean, I say this all the time that I wish I could take all that I've learned in 20 plus years as a professional and, 12 plus years as a father and, embody all of that and then enjoy it in my 20s with a sense of identity and confidence and
Yeah,
resilience
yeah,
that
exactly.
you can't create except through going through stuff.
Totally.
And so, I
Totally.
100% agree with that perspective. Mike, you and I could do this all day, 7 days a week, and it'd be enjoyable every day. I, truly thank you for your time and for your contributions on this episode. Really am excited for what your future has in store, what love has in store, and I will absolutely be trying to catch some of those professional volleyball games in the future.
All right, sounds good. If one of your kids starts playing volleyball, let me know. We'll get some training. We'll make it
We've
happen.
got to divide and
You know
conquer
they're
and
going
go
to
in
get
four
good
different
coaching,
directions.
right? You know they're
I
going to get
know.
good coaching based on what I told you at the bare minimum. But
Absolutely.
thank you for having me, Robbie. This is awesome. I've been enjoying the podcast so far. It's been great. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike.